Hello and welcome to another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop. After the heady heights of driving multi-million pound cars in the Alps and generally enjoying myself, you find me back here at the ranch with something a little more down to earth, but not very much. It's still a Ferrari. It's this car here, the 456 GT. This car's just come in conveniently, timing wise. It's come in part exchange against another car that a customer was selling. So that's good. It's an interesting part of Ferrari's history really, because Ferrari went into mid-engine cars. With the first car was the Dino 206 GT, and then followed their sort of supercar, the Berlinetta Boxer, the 365, which was a very fast car, very capable car. But as we went into the 1990s, the Testarossa followed, 512M, 512TR, and Luca de Montezemolo decided that this was not the direction that he wanted Ferrari to go in, and he actually had the authority to assert his decision. And the result was going back to the glory days of the front engine, rear-wheel drive, traditional high-performance GT, cars like the Daytona, the glory days of the great big snortingly powerful V12 engine, and cars that in period you could sort of, well, you could still to this day if you wanted to, cut swathes through great wadges of continent as you drove your hundreds of miles a day in air-conditioned comfort with your chosen passenger, or in this case, passengers. But this car is, it's sort of, the 456 is very colour sensitive actually. And one of the best colours, this is not Tour de France blue, as you might imagine. This is called Swatter's blue, which has nothing to do with flies or insects. This is to do with the Belgian Ferrari importer Jack Swatters, who was one of those very old people like Luigi Cinetti, or in the US, Colonel Ronnie Hoare in the UK, who had a personal relationship with Enzo Ferrari, and that built up and he became the concessionaire for that particular country. So Swatter's blue, lovely colour, metallic blue. 456 to my mind is a very, very pretty car. It's a car that Pininfarina, through the lens of my eyes, got right first time. The beautiful compound curves, the whole sort of sheer curvature of the body is just very pleasing. I actually prefer the shape to the 550, but that's just my personal view. The two cars were cast out of a very similar mould. The 550 was even closer to the Daytona blueprint with two seats and more high performance again. But this car was very much of the era, the 355, sort of the mid-90s. They were already heading down the direction of making their cars more sort of everyday user-friendly, so people could use them as an everyday car. I suppose it started with the Mondial in 1981 or whenever it came out, but they took it to another level. So you could drive this car very comfortably, as I say, and I think they're still a bit of a sleeper now. I mean, you can buy a decent 456 for starting around £35,000. Bearing in mind that these cars were, whatever they were new, £180,000 or something in the mid-90s. And it's got to be borne in mind that you're maintaining what is potentially a £180,000 car. So you can expect big bills with these cars. And things like the cam belts need to be changed on them. They've gone up to 5 years now in between changes, which is far more sensible than the 3 years when they first came out. And things of that nature, but really, really great car this. Very good, very underrated. And one of the facets of this car is, like a lot of Ferrari engines, when you ask of it, when you floor the throttle at 2,000–3,000 RPM, it's up and away. There's no waiting. It's got loads of torque. This particularly is the case with this car because what Ferrari did with this engine was alter the firing order. So it's a traditional V12, in this case 65 degrees between the vanks, not 60, like the likes of the Daytona, so it's harking back to the Dino days in that respect. But the traditional firing order of a six-cylinder engine is 153-624, number one generally being the front cylinder. And on a V12 it was 1, 7, 5, 11. It sort of alternated across the banks. But what Ferrari did with this engine was make it 1, 12, so they were actually firing next to each other, the pulses, instead of alternating along the crankshaft at different ends of the engine. And it gave it, through some clever acoustics and clever science, it gave it more low-down torque, which is something that V12s can sort of suffer with, really. When the Germans went into building V12s, BMW and Mercedes in the late 80s, the BMW V12 in particular was criticised for being not very torquey. Lovely engine, actually, and of course it went on to spawn some of the world's greatest engines. But Ferrari actually counteracted this. They went around, top-end power is no problem, they can get that all day, but they actually altered the firing order specifically to give this engine more low-down torque, and it works. What I'm going to do on this car, the top tips with so many of these classic cars now, is it's all about making the fine adjustments on the car just so. It can make or break the driving experience. I can't possibly cover what you can do and what you can't do with every car and every make and model, but there are some things that are generic. So I'm just going to explain one of the things that can instantly release a lot more power on one of these classic Ferraris. So let's take a look at that. Well, this car is right on the cusp. The mid-90s was a big sort of change in automotive technology. We went on to OBD2, onboard diagnostics, the generic fault-finding system in 1996, because cars were getting so complicated with engine management systems that it was becoming increasingly difficult without a workable diagnostic system to find faults with them. And this car is one of the last cars of its era to have a throttle cable set up on it. Of course, everything starts with the most expensive and complex cars and cascades down technology-wise, generally speaking. And this car still has a trusty throttle cable on it. And a lot of classic cars, what happens is, over a period of time, like any other cable, it stretches a bit. And people don't realise that when you use the accelerator, and we're not suggesting everybody should blast around using full revs, full throttle all the time in their classic cars, but you often find that you're being sold short on the potential of the engine's energy, of the power. And the reason for that is that the throttle cable stretches. You floor the throttle in the car when you want to have a bit of excitement and a bit of acceleration, and the car isn't developing its full power because the throttle isn't opening all the way. And this engine is in perfect health. This car's done 54,000 miles. And with modern engines such as this, I put this in this category, with sort of aluminium coated cylinder blocks and things like that, they're really not properly run in until they've done around about 50,000 miles. So people buy their new car, they do 8, 10, 20,000 miles in it, think it's old, trade it in for a replacement, and the car actually isn't properly run in yet. So this car is sort of in the prime of its life, really. But what's happened is the throttle cable has just stretched slightly, and in fact there are two throttle cables on this car because there's a throttle butterfly on either side of the engine. Like any V12, it's two 6-cylinder engines married together, really. And you've got a throttle cable that comes from there to that throttle housing, and then a U-shaped cable comes around here to this housing. And both of them have actually stretched to the point where the throttles aren't opening fully. So we're going to adjust those cables, and this car should fly once that. Sounds simple, very easy to do. You need to get it right, because if you over adjust it, you can start breaking brackets and things. If the pedal is on the floor in the car and it's straining the mechanism, that's not good either. But we'll get the throttle adjustment right, and then we'll take the car for a run and see how it is. Right, so I'm now going to ask my able assistant in the car to floor the throttle as though they were accelerating hard on the road. Okay? Right. That's hard down, yeah? See that? That's about 30 brake horsepower, particularly when you multiply it by 2 by the other throttle body. Something as simple as that can unleash another 30 at least brake horsepower. Okay, so what we're going to do, you can see that. What we're going to do is just adjust that out and try it again. Okay, thanks. What we want to hear is a clicking noise, and the click tells us that the throttle butterfly inside here has exactly hit. Ferrari pre-adjusted, like all manufacturers, pre-adjusted a full open throttle stop, so that the throttle butterfly is exactly in the venturi, letting the maximum amount of air pass. So I'm going to undo this cable here, and just carefully, I'm thinking about 3 turns, based on experience, about 3 turns of the tensioning nut. Just undo that. So this is the outer cable, and what you can see here is that there's more thread on this side than this side, and that's because Ferrari actually built in this adjustment to be done at some stage in the car's future for this very reason. So I'm going to back this nut off about 3 turns, something like that, and then tighten that one up to the same, and then we knit them up, and you can see it's just exposed a bit more thread on this side, a bit less on that. It's just pulled the outer cable that way a bit, but that's all it takes to open the throttle butterfly another 10 or 15 degrees to its original maximum setting, and you wouldn't believe the amount of difference that makes to the power of the engine, just because it's letting more air in and more fuel. If we over adjust it, we back it off. If it's not quite right, we just adjust it a bit more. Simple. So now we've adjusted it, we're going to do the same experiment again. Okay, go for it. There you are, click. Don't know whether you can hear that click. Just try it again. Click. That is now going full throttle. I cannot pull that anymore, and it's just touching the floor inside the car, exactly as when the car was new and exactly as it should be. Okay, thanks. So what we do now is adjust this cable here, which is the U-shaped cable that goes around to the other throttle housing, to make sure that that's synchronized. Sounds simple, but the difference is remarkable. Well, now that we've adjusted the cable on that side, what we're looking to do is see the same thing happen on this side, and I suspect this cable will be stretched a little bit as well. So we just want to synchronize both of them. So can you just floor the throttle again? Yeah, that's not going all the way either. There you go. That's lost power as well, believe it or not. Just something as simple as that. Okay, so we'll adjust that out, and hey presto. So again, we can see there's more thread on this side than this side. This linkage pulls the cable through the outer cable here and round to the other butterfly. So what I'm going to do is just undo that, probably about 3 turns, something like that. And we'll see, just to make sure that again the throttle opens fully. It hits the click, hits the stop, but no more than that. And that way the 2 throttles are now resynchronized to their original factory settings. And with the engine having been run in and freed off, this car should fly now. Okay, so we've adjusted the other side of this cable now, and we're just going to make sure this side opens all the way too. Okay? And again, there's the click. Okay, perfect. Thanks. This car is running really well. I mean, it should do, but one thing I do want to test, now that we've adjusted the throttle linkage and got it opening up all the way, because the throttles were not opening all the way at all, is just to try the acceleration and see if those big lungs, those huge wads of torque that this engine has, are actually present. So I'm just going to let the oil warm up a bit. Still not up to a decent temperature. It is dry sumped, this car, so the oil is in a remote tank, as per a lot of 12-cylinder Ferraris. So we're just getting everything, all the T's and P's right, the temperatures and pressures, a bit like flying a plane really. And we'll see what sort of shape it's in. Well, it's warmed up now, so it's time to just open the taps and see what's there. Yeah, feel that lovely instant torque, absolutely instant. That's what really separates these engines from early V12s, Ferrari V12s for that matter. It's not like the old 275 4-cams where, okay, they pull below 4,500 RPM, but it's after that they really come into their own. This is absolutely neck-snappingly instant. That's 2,500 RPM, and she's off. Modern cars are all drive-by-wire now, but in the old days it was a good old throttle cable, and it's amazing how many people actually drive their classic car and don't realise that there's more potential under the bonnet, under the hood. So yeah, it's all very much present and correct. It's going really well. This car is really in its prime, 56,000 miles, and that's the result. Electrifying performance for a 25-year-old four-seater car. And that's the thing about these cars, they're so accessible. My earlier comments about maintenance notwithstanding, if you do get the right car, they're fantastic value for money. When you think what sort of the equivalent price, £40,000 would buy you new, what? A lower model Mercedes E-Class maybe? Something like that. The other thing I would say is probably a set of more modern wheels would set them off a bit better looks-wise. The wheels are quite tucked inside the arches, and they do stand very well with a set of wider wheels on them. They're a bit like sort of Japanese cars of this era as well. They were quite recessed into the wheel arches, the wheels as well. But a very, very accomplished package. I mean, it's quite a warm, muggy day today, and we've just got the air conditioning ticking over, and it's really, really comfy in here. One of the problems with the 456 was that it was, in sort of the modern era, it was one of the most unreliable models Ferrari made. They had all sorts of terrible glitches when these cars were first launched. The window regulators, to get the windows to dip a few millimeters when you open the door, and then to work without any sort of frame around them. Ferrari made heavy weather of that really, where other manufacturers with the BMW with the E36, they've got it more or less sorted. Ferrari in period tried 3 modifications on the window regulators to try and get them to work consistently and reliably. I mean, 3 modifications in period. But the thing is, now that these problems have been ironed out and the car is more reliable, it's actually quite an attractive proposition. And the performance, it is sort of a full 4-seater. I once had a drive in the south of Spain 20 odd years ago, and there were 4 adults in a 456. I was in a 355 on the Ronda road between Marbella and Ronda, which is a fabulous road. And we were all pressing on, and he had 4 people, including himself, in the 456, and we were moving, and they were all big guys, and we were quite comfy when we got out the other end. They were a bit shaken, but not too stirred. Yeah, although the electrics may be a bit clunky and some of the trim can have that really unpleasant sort of sticky feeling that Ferraris and Mercs actually of this era had, and some other cars, all that's fixable. Put new ones on, right as rain, good as new. These things can all be sorted now, and just a tremendously capable car. We don't talk about the fuel consumption, but you know, you're not using it every day, presumably. Yeah, once again, let's just open the taps and give it a bit of that Ferrari magic. Nothing wrong with that. It very much depends on what you want of your classic Ferrari. But if you're sort of, you know, wanting to make a statement, if you want resale red, if you want, you know, the car with the very loud aftermarket exhaust like a Tubi or something like that, then the 456 isn't really your bag. But if you want something that isn't actually yelling, "Look at me," but is still extremely capable, then this is probably the car for you. I wouldn't go as far as to say people don't give it a second look, but some people just walk past it and then suddenly realise it's something special, or they, you know, you can overtake them in a sort of spirited manner without breaking the speed limit. But they don't sort of, you know, look at that fool in his red Ferrari, etc. It's quite a sort of subtle car, particularly if it's this colour scheme such as this. And with the standard factory exhaust on, it is actually quite quiet as well. One of the beauties of this car is, whilst the modern Ferraris, the turbocharged cars, are a very different beast in terms of power delivery, there's something about a really gutsy, normally aspirated engine that will pull from really low revs, just like when you open all 12 throttles with your right foot, it's just bang, it's away. And you don't get that with a modern turbocharged car. It's a different vibe. And I actually like the normally aspirated Ferrari feel, and that's why they built it this way. They altered the firing order of the engine, as I mentioned before, to give the car more torque, and they got it right. They really did. It was very clever the way it was done, and the results speak for themselves. Well, that concludes another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop. Hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll be back soon.